You're on.
I would like to welcome everyone to our meeting tonight. Call the meeting to order. At this time, I'd like to call on Bill Melvin from Haywood County to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. O God, our liberation and peace, we seek the power of your Spirit, that we may live in full union with you, ourselves, and our sisters and brothers with mental illness. That our actions and decisions lead us to overcome fear, acquire knowledge, and be advocates with compassion and enlightened truth and service. May we go forward into our community with a renewed sense of vision, hope, and new beginnings for the future. Amen.
Our next item on the agenda is public comment. Should anyone sign up to speak?
Yes, I believe so, too. I believe Mr. Rice did, and Ms. Short.
Okay.
Did you approve the agenda before?
Yes, I did.
I move to approve the agenda.
Well,
We got changes now.
I have one recommended change on the agenda under G, board of records items, to move number 6. And I'll be more discussed about that later. I think that's all the things we can do.
Move we approve the agenda as amended.
We have a motion to second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I believe that's unanimous. Did you give you make the motions? No. Okay. Did you make the motion? Mr. Thompson, second. Okay, this is the time we'll have public comment, and who's going to speak first? Ms. Short, do you want to?
Hi, my name is Mary Short, and this is my daughter Katie. She's an Innovations Waiver consumer. I was just glancing over your minutes, your draft minutes, by the way, and you got my public comment from last month wrong. So you might want to go to Jerry's website and review it so we can remember what it was I was talking about. Don't want to waste my 5 minutes. I have a general concern about the Registry of Unmet Needs and how that seems to be growing and growing and growing. And I find it hard to reconcile the Registry of Unmet Needs with the number of people on the Innovations Waiver. That's from your Operations at a Glance documents. It just doesn't seem to make sense that people on the registry, it just doesn't seem to indicate when people from the Registry of Unmet Needs actually got an available Innovations Waiver slot. So that's one thing. The second thing I want to talk about is something that happened in our neighborhood. You have Smoky in its, I don't know what it's called, the housing group or unit or whatever you are, have adult mental health homes, and there is a home in Alexander County, well, a group. It's called the Wesley Heights Apartments. And then next door to the Wesley Heights Apartments is a DD group home run by Turning Point. Well, Saturday morning, I was awakened and my neighbors to what we thought was gunfire at the home. And I got a copy of the police report before I came up here, but apparently it was just a domestic violence incident. But my concern is this isn't the first incident at that home, and it's not the first incident with that resident at that home. And so I'm a little concerned about how Katie's safety is being impacted by this Wesley Heights Apartments that Smoky Mountain is placing some of its consumers in. And when I read through the housing thing on your website, it doesn't really indicate that police calls, well, anyway. So that's just one of my concerns that I thought the board of directors should be aware of. I also am very concerned, as I have talked to other families from last month to this month, about the issue of standardization and the way things are being done from MCO to MCO to MCO. And it seems that we, as parents of adults with intellectual disabilities, it seems clear that even though we really can't move, or maybe we can move and our slot stays with us, or maybe it doesn't stay with us, but it appears that our two options are we can stay with an MCO that has a reasonable policy about relative legal guardians being paid providers, meaning if they suspect that there's an issue, that they investigate it. But as a general rule, they accept the idea that relatives legal guardians aren't causing harm. Or we can move to an MCO where they seem very generous with their interpretation of the services and the sets of service limits, and allow for the more complicated cases to exceed the sets of limits without filing appeals and all of that nature. So I just think that if standardization was the point of these MCOs, it seems to be missing. So I'm hoping that the Secretary and the Governor and their CCEs are going to cure that problem for us. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I don't envy any of you sitting here listening to all this state policy and all this stuff that you have to deal with. I've listened at it for 20 years and I'm still brain dead. A concern I heard earlier today in the meeting was about the hospital beds and them being paid for from Smokey earlier. And my question would be, by providing money earlier, have there been a return on investment by doing that in regard to services? Has it improved? And the reason that I go that route, I deal with a lot of special needs children in school. And I'm concerned, I'd like to have somebody, a point person within Smokey that I could speak with concerning school issues. Because in Buncombe County, we got 25,000 students. And in the city, we got 4,000. And you know how many, when you cross all these counties, you've got a lot of kids, and that's a big number of who you're serving. And I have plenty of expertise in IDEA in helping, and I think I could identify a lot of things that would save Smokey some money, and maybe understand some policies that you might have or could come up with that could save you some money. And maybe looking at from the state policy side of things, that the Department of Public Instruction might be able to help us out in some of these areas. Even with Western Highlands, all these years, I have never understood why nobody was at the table in regard to these issues that I'm talking about. Because every kid that you have on your roll, I'll guarantee you, under 18, most of them are in school. So I would be happy to take my time and sit down with someone and help you look at some of this stuff. The other thing is that I have taken my time to video these meetings, finance, executive, and irregular, and I got it on YouTube, and I want it to be a positive thing for you, because I think if you go back and listen to it, you'll find that it is, because you just cover a lot of coverage area, and there's people that don't get this message. And if you want to send a good message, don't say it in here, okay? I mean, if you want to send a bad message, you'll get it too. But anyway, I think we can send a message across the state by a good role model here. So if we want to make it good, I'll put it on YouTube. It's there. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Before we do the next item on the agenda, let me just mention something, and I know I'm bad to do this, and I guess one thing we can do is slow down a little bit as we go through these meetings, so that we know who's making the motions. If you'll state your name, and whoever makes the second state your name, then Jill can make sure all the minutes are properly recorded. That would be a big help to us, and I say that every meeting, but I forget to do that. So we appreciate your cooperation in doing that. The next item, Consumer and Family Advisory Committee report. I'd like to call first on Jeannie Pugh.
Thank you. Before we launch into a very heavy agenda tonight, Christina suggested that I take a moment to share some news about Pat Dennis. And Christina and Brian Shipping and I are aware of a really large honor that has come Pat's way that we wanted the board to know about. Many of you know from knowing Pat and hearing her each month talk about her many activities that she is a very, very active advocate across the state. Pat is currently on the Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness, typically known as PAMI. She is on that group's board and she is a vice chair. She will rotate out of that role in December. And that board is asking Pat if she will step into the chairperson role, which is a high statewide honor that we want you to know about. With that appointment, if Pat accepted it, she would also be stepping onto the board of Disability Rights in North Carolina, which again would be a large honor and would really reflect on the great work that Pat has done as an advocate. Now, Pat will have to consider her options, and we'll have to have some guidance, perhaps from Allison and Christina, about how those roles might mesh with the other really wonderful development path that's happening for you, which is to finally have CDOT members join this board. But before we launch into all of that, and Pat will handle that privately on her own, I just wanted this board to recognize for a minute the strong advocacy career of Pat Dennis.
Quite a predicament to be in. From years ago, mental health professionals crossing the street to keep from walking down the same street with you till having the opportunity to be at two very different tables, which I will have to choose one. And all of you will probably help me make that choice. And of course, my response at the PAMI retreat was, I want to be where I can do the most good. And of course, I want to do the most good in my own neighborhood and the counties that surround us. So I guess we'll have more of this conversation a little bit later on. But I'm just thankful that CFAC has had an opportunity to be at the tables and that we are at the tables. And I really hate the fact that in order for CFAC members to have an opportunity to have voting slots, that there's changes coming and that other people that I feel are very deserving and need to stay at this table are going to be leaving. I wish Raleigh would have had more input from consumers like me, and I would have told them they just needed to leave this board alone, maybe add a couple of CFAC members and a couple of other people. But sometimes they don't ask for consumer input until after decisions are made. So for me, I don't want to see any folks leave. I think it is great that consumers are going to have more opportunities and family members, and I certainly don't want to deal with some political hot water as I've been reading newspaper articles. But our CFAC, our steering committee, we met September the 9th. Our transition work group met August the 30th and September the 13th. The last state to local CFAC call was September the 18th. Dave Richard will be at our October the 15th CFAC meeting, and I was actually on an advocates call for consumers. It's a small group that got once a month. We talked with him, and or we talked with Stuart, and Stuart had him and Jim Gerard and some other high-level people on this call yesterday. And he said one thing was for sure, that consumers were gonna continue to be at the table along with family members, and that there's gonna be more need for that rather than less need as the transitions and new things move forward. So I was kind of glad to hear that. The Smoky Mountain Center in Western Highlands CPAC meet and greet will be October the 19th at Seasons at Highland Lake Inn. And the Smoky Mountain and Western Highlands CPAC will be meeting together for the first time on November the 19th. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
You know, I present all your volunteer time, and I can see why a lot of people would like for you to be at a table. You do an excellent job. I know that I don't necessarily speak for the board, but in speaking with board members, as I've been part of this, everybody has always been so grateful and so thankful and so appreciative of you. So we really do. We know you'll make the right decision. We don't want to put additional pressure on you, but we truly, I think I can say that everybody sees you as a big part of this.
And it has a whole lot to do with decisions you folks make too, pertaining to me, but, you know, I will have to, I try to play dumb and I'll sit there. You know, I was hoping if this ever come about, I could just abstain when it comes to things from Smoky. So, and part of this might be good for Smoky, it might not, I don't know, and they said to me, well, you know, if anybody files a complaint and we have to sue Smoky Mountain, then we'd be suing one of our own board members. And I'm like, well, I was just hoping that it wouldn't come to this, and of course I'm not real big on anybody getting sued. And fortunately, Smoky Mountain has a pretty good reputation at disability rights, not only with family council, but with disability rights board. You know, I very rarely hear anything negative said, and most times, if I say something, it's pretty positive. So, you know, I'm glad of that too, because that's not always the case in certain areas. So, it's nice that maybe that's a reputation out there.
Well, I think in understanding the decisions that you need to make what's best for you, of course, we would be very pleased to have you continue being part of us. But if there's some consultation or information you need from us to make your decision in regard to conflict, we definitely, Allison, can definitely help you with that and give you some information. So,
Well,
but
Vicki
thank
says
you.
I probably just need to have a good long conversation with you.
We can make that happen. We can truly make that happen. But thank you, and we honor you, Pat. Congratulations.
Thank you, Pat. Our next item on the agenda is the Finance Committee report. I'd like to call on Ed Charlton.
Thank you, Rick. Each of you got a copy of the agenda for the finance meeting we had today at 3 o'clock, 3:30, whatever it was. I've been to so many meetings today, I can't remember where I was. But anyway, before I give a report, I believe Lisa wants to speak to you about one of the items that's in that packet that is pertaining to the budget.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to take a minute and talk about Smoky Mountain Center's continuation allocation that we just received in the last couple of weeks. And what I'm referring to is our allocation of state and federal funds that come to us from the Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services. For fiscal year 12-13, the year that just ended, statewide, the General Assembly had approved a $20 million community services funding reduction. And again, I'm talking about last fiscal year. Smoky's share of that last year was around $3.4 million. That was supposed to have been a one-time cut. When we did our budget this year, we did not include that money again, anticipating it may not be restored, and it was not restored in our allocation this year. Not only was it not restored, but in the information we got, we're now being told that reduction is a permanent reduction. So the $3.4 million that was taken last year that would have been allocated for state-funded services was not reinstated for fiscal year 13-14. In addition to that, Smoky received two other funding cuts. One cut was, they're both in the block grant funding. One is in the amount of $21,000, And that was taken from the Juvenile Justice Alexander Detention Center funding. We used to get $40,000 to support services at that facility, and that was reduced by $18,000. I'm sorry, it was reduced by $21,000 down to 18 something. I'm just kind of rounding. The other cut that we took was $62,000 of work first funding. Last year, we had $225,000 some change to do work first. It was cut last year down to $120,000. This year, it's been further cut down to $58,000. That's what's remaining. And we were talking about it earlier in the Finance Committee. We have 15 counties to do work first activities and then work first services. And we have a total of $58,000 over 15 counties. So we'll be working with the DSSs and others to figure out how we carry this out. Our allocation also did not contain any administrative funding for us to carry out our administrative responsibilities for state and federal funds, and that allocation is supposed to be forthcoming. We have not been told there will be any cuts in that, but until we see the amount, we just can't be certain. It's supposed to be forthcoming sometime next week. Last year, after we took the community service funding cuts, we had some intellectual and developmental disability funding restored on a one-time basis, and that was used for ADVIT, supported employment, and other IDD services. We were told today that some of that would be restored again this year on a one-time basis. We haven't gotten notified about what amount that will be. When we get that, we will revise providers' contracts and put that money back in their contracts. So you may hear some about that. That action will be taken once we know the exact amount. It's hard for us to go back and amend contracts with flat dollar amounts and everything. We don't know what amount to add back in yet. But as soon as we get notified, we'll amend the contracts so those providers will be notified about the increase that will be put back in their contracts. Of course, those funding cuts, the two that we weren't aware that were coming, resulted in some budget amendments. So those were also in the package to reduce those two small pots of funding. And also added in the budget amendment was the the three-way funding for Haywood and Cannon. I think that was about $1.4 million. So that ends up Smoky having an operating budget right now of a little over $161 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. For those of you that maybe did not pick up your packet or didn't, just a green copy that is in the packet of the financial part of your what was sent to you. I suggest that you get that and maybe go over it very carefully, because on the second page is a lot of what she just spoke to regarding our current budget. Your Finance Committee did meet this afternoon and at 3 o'clock, and we had item number 4, item 6 and 7, which Lisa just spoke to, and item number 8, that there were motions to approve the particular items. I would now offer to you a motion to approve the actions of your Finance Committee.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second to the actions of the Finance Committee? Judy Pope, second. Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Board of Directors items. First, under Board Chair issues, I just want to point out something. Several of you have asked if this is your last meeting, and it is not. We, as you recall earlier, we took the proposed Smoky Mountain, Western Highland reconstituted board off the agenda. Let me explain what we're going to do. We're going to set up a meeting with all the commissioner chairs or their representatives, commissioner, jointly, and all the county managers. We're going to try to do this in the next couple of weeks and have a discussion about this whole process. There's been a lot of discussion about it. So we're going to try to do that, and then we're going to try to have this back on the agenda for our October meeting. So that's sort of the direction we're going tonight. That's why we took it on. So we thought we'd have some more discussion that might help everyone's understanding about this issue. So I just want to point that out. Do you have any questions or comments about it? Okay, seeing there's none, the second item under board of directors item, standing review of smoking conflict of interest, business transaction, Allison, is there anything? Okay, thanks. Under the executive committee report, we've actually had 2 meetings on September 19th, and we had one earlier today, starting at 12. Of course, we've had a lot of discussion about the LME, MCO, regionalization issues that are going on right now across the state. And we talked a lot about board restructuring, which y'all are well aware. We talked about consolidation agreement and the Western Highlands closeout. And Brian's going to address some of these items later. Again, the executive committee has met twice since our last meeting, so just want to mention those items tonight. Our next item is closed session pursuant to subsections 143.318.11A, 3 and 6 of the general statutes of North Carolina, consultants with attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege. Is there a motion to go to closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question first.
Yes, ma'am.
Since the county manager, John Yates, is wanted to come in place for Wilkes County Commissioner, should he not stay?
Yes, ma'am.
Billy Kennedy, I move the motion.
Okay.
Go into closed session.
Green, I second the motion.
I have a motion, a second, to go into closed session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Started back, we've still got quite a bit of business, so we're going to get started back. Ready? Next item on the agenda, is the approval of the resolution to add counties to the Smoky Mountain Center Area Authority. Everybody should receive a copy of the resolution. Does everybody have a copy of the resolution? You've got a lot of papers on there.
It's a one-page document. It's like this. Is it the?
This is one we were just doing for the one I got today.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's all right. Didn't come in the package.
No.
Now, this is a requirement, you know, we've spoken at different times about Senate Bill 208 and how that made very significant changes to the law around mergers, and while it did that more from the perspective of an MCO that was not operating properly and could be deemed, I forget the actual term in the law, insufficient, and then be required to merge and have their contract transferred. Basically, many of the same features are the case for us in terms of the consolidation that we're doing with Western. And this is one of the provisions here, is that, you know, and before there were all kinds of different requirements through county government and county commissioners, and it's been vastly streamlined. So this is, on our side of this is what is needed. A simple resolution by the board of directors of the MCO to accept the counties.
Is everybody clear that 8 counties are Buncombe, Henderson, Madison, Mitchell, Polk, Rutherford, Pennsylvania, and Yancey counties? Are there any other questions or comments about the resolution?
One question, and I think we already discussed the proposed board structure, but I just want to know, just so it's stated, a vote in favor of this does not constitute a vote in favor of the proposed board structure, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
This says,
This is just part of the merger.
Except within one, is it not correct, within a month of this,
That's-
we will have to
No.
be kind of.
That's not this, within a month of the merger or consolidation, and there is a separate agreement that you'll see that relates specifically to that. So this is, but this is something that is a requirement, a precursor, to be able to do that. It just, it adds those counties to the Smoky catchment area, but it doesn't, it's not a part of the, it doesn't signal approval of the merger agreement.
Mr. Green, I move that we adopt the resolution as presented.
I second.
Okay? Mr. Green, get that? Okay, you seconded, okay? Any more discussion? Everybody understand? All in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay. CEO report, Brian?
well, do I have the permission of the chair to change the order of things to make it work a little better with this recent action? Okay, let's talk about the merger agreement, because all of these things are separate but related. And let's just rewind the clock a little bit here. What we started off with, of course, was the state's choice to terminate the contract with Western for operation under the waiver. There's also a companion to that, which is the LME functions that have to do with state-funded services and the administration of those funds. What we did jointly with Western was to create a transition plan that talked about the interest that Western and Smoky had to come together. And most people would just use the term merger, and we always chuckle about this because there's certain features around merger that have to do with succession and liability. It's awkward because the general statute talks about merger in a way that, well, we're structuring what we do to avoid a successor organization. So we always stumble over these words and kind of offer that explanation. So we had that transition document, and this is going back into the spring when I was on my respite. That was followed by a merger agreement. Now that transition agreement was agreed to by the secretary, really as a formality. The next feature, really a big milestone, was the management agreement that really set out the responsibility and authority between Western and Smoky on how business was going to be conducted until October 1st. Again, in that transition agreement, one of the probably the most important thing we asked for was for the state's consideration to extend the contract beyond the time which they wanted to terminate it, because it was going to take more time to create this consolidated organization. So we asked for that to be delayed. Originally, I think it was going to be August 1st that they wanted the contract terminated with Western and would have transferred it to Smoky. We wanted that moved back to October 1st. So we were granted that. Well, we are now at the time where we're ready to have that merger agreement done. Okay, that is the capstone on all that has occurred. And the irony of this is that it almost comes as an anticlimax. So much of what was done in Senate Bill 208 really framed this up pretty succinctly, that it took out a lot of the kinds of really difficult things that other mergers, and again I'm using that term, other mergers have gone through. So we're now at the point of having the final agreement that would exist between Western Highlands Network and Smoky Mountain Center that would consolidate those two organizations and functionally represent the end to Western Highlands Network. Now, every time we say something, there's always a little caveat with it, and it's just the nature of this. There will continue to be responsibilities that we've talked about as closeout activities on behalf of Western. And we went into great detail describing all of those. That's gonna take months. It's gonna take a long time. And what the Western Highlands Board did was, well, we really presented two options to them. They could continue to have employees in some way, shape, or manner, and it would have been an awkward situation, but they could have done that. Or they could conduct all of those closeout activities, or they could choose to have Smokey do those for the benefit of Western Highlands in relationship to a contract, a services agreement. So they chose the latter, which I don't think anybody had any doubt that that was the right thing to do. That became really part of this merger agreement. And while I believe the way that's constructed is that's an appendix actually in the merger agreement. So there's really two things we would want to take action on this evening. That is that merger agreement and the contract between Western and Smokey on those closeout activities. And we had quite a bit of discussion in the executive committee about this. You know, we would, of course, what we always do is point out to any issues in here where there's something that gives us pause, or we don't think is clear, or, you know, really trying to point out nuances, and there just aren't a lot. It's really very straightforward at this point. The management agreement was a much bigger document to negotiate and conduct. This is really just the final piece. So I'll be happy to respond to any questions, or anybody else might, or Rick or folks in the executive committee had quite a bit of discussion about this, as we did with the Western folks who were here for this as well. And actually urged us to take this action this evening, and that they would have reciprocal action when that board meets next Friday morning, I believe.
Have our attorneys looked at this draft and found it to be?
Over and over and over.
Yes.
Yes.
Whoever our attorneys are.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion that we approve both the closeout agreement and the merger agreement as consistent with recommendations from the executive committee. And I'll just add that for those of us on the committee, we reviewed this very thoroughly and made suggestions for change, and we applaud the staff for doing a very thorough job on it, and especially working out some liability issues and so forth.
We have a motion on the floor.
I'll second that.
Second. Okay, Mr. Charlton, second. Okay, are there no questions?
And I'm still not clear as to the new board composition not being included in those two documents.
Okay,
It's not spelled out.
let me explain the relationship there in the timeline. The House Bill 399 was the 11th hour piece of legislation. It's really about, doesn't have anything to do with board. Slid that in there. That's how I refer to that, as that's kind of our waiver of the governance regulation. You know, that, and remember, that goes back 2 sessions ago, it's a year and a half old. The way that was, in order for us to have that pass on governance, because of all the work we were doing with the transition, it said basically the following: that with the approval of the secretary, and this is another little sidebar, there's some technical approvals that we're in the process of getting from the secretary around the dissolution and the acceptance of the counties, that within 30 days of the secretary approving the merger agreement, okay? So it's approved here tonight, and a week from Friday, it's approved by the Western Board, it gets sent to the secretary, and in the statute, she is the one that has the final approval on that merger agreement. That starts the clock, or the calendar, in fact. We have, according to that, House Bill 399, there's 30 days of time when the new board has to be constituted consistent with you know, it's 199 or whatever you want, however it's represented in the law now. And so whatever we had to waiver to comes into play within 30 days of the secretary signing off on that merger agreement. And then just in the case that something messed up, that there would be malingering or something, I don't know, you know, there's a sunset on it. So it's actually April 1st is the outside date. And knowing that people might think, well, gee, should we not do the merger agreement? Is that a way to kind of dodge the governance thing? You know, I'm going to say to you, it is not. You know, both organizations need to have the merger agreement done, you know, despite the fact that it does begin the clock ticking on the board composition. So.
And that's all
And,
I
you know,
can
we had
say is
discussion.
it does, in fact, put
Yeah.
a time limit on that board changing within probably
Correct.
60 days, however long the secretary decides to take it. So
Correct.
that voting for this is putting in motion dissolving this board and setting up the committee
That's
by
correct.
statute. So to say that it's not part of that is not completely genuine, because it really is setting up that, and whether we have another meeting before then or not, I don't know when the appropriate time to discuss it is, because we've already discussed it. Once we vote on this, then we're committed. And that's gonna come through without, then it doesn't matter what discussions we have, because it's going.
Well,
And I understand we'd still be under the statute to reconstitute a board without this merger.
Correct.
So I understand that it's Raleigh that's the main problem here in some legislatures, but this does step us down the road to dissolving this board and forming a new board.
What the comment about the resolution about accepting the counties, that's, well, I guess you could say that's a requirement in Senate Bill 208.
Yeah.
But, you know, does that start the clock on anything else? No, that does not.
I understand, and that your hands are tied and you're doing all you can. and
Well, I
we
just
wanna
wanna
get
make
this
sure.
board I'm not
Yeah. I mean,
disparaging anybody here, but this is in fact starting the clock.
Yes, it
doesn't
is.
matter what discussions we have after this, that new board will come in effect 30 days after the secretary signs it in place.
or not.
Or not.
Okay.
Keep in mind too, though, that one, if we go into merger talks with another organization or entity, that would put us over the threshold where we can form our own governance structure, and/or our legislative advocacy efforts could end up having the same effect. And if, you know, the thing that concerns me greatly is that, you know, right now, we seem to be the shining star among the MCOs, LMEs, in terms of the way we're moving forward and progressing. And it's very clear, I mean, I think we'll be talking about it here in a little bit, about the regionalization concept. I mean, the state wants us to get down to 4, so much so that they're talking by next year, next spring. And, you know, we're either going to be a player at that table or we're going to be drugged to that table. And my concern is if we go from being the shining star to being drugged to that table, we're not going to get what we want. And that's, you know, I hate that, you know, that there wasn't enough foresight to realize that through mergers and, you know, economies of scale, you know, moving forward to that fewer number of MCOs, that we might need a larger board structure and more county input and so forth. But it's the hand we've been dealt. And unfortunately, you know, I know there are commissioners sitting around this table. You know, I hate to pull anybody out, but I see Judy there. You know, Judy's county, Ashe County, created a change in an ordinance that the people that were affected by that ordinance just kind of thumbed their nose and said, we don't like what you just did today, we're not going to comply with it. You know, Ashe County would probably be, commissioners would probably be offended. And if we do that to the state repeatedly in this process over this structure issue, which likely won't mean anything by next spring, we're going to end up, I'm afraid, instead of being the shining star, being the black sheep of the family. That's my concern. So
I'm not looking to be a shining star. I'm looking to maintain a voice for all county commissioners in decision-making, not the advisory board. If you want our money, then let us have a voice.
Well, and I don't disagree with that. I mean, I
just wanted to say
understand.
that out loud. And I think most of the commissioners sitting here, in fact, maybe even one from Wilkes County, he walked out last week, would agree with that.
Well, going along for the sake of going along, it's never been in my nature, if it's not the right thing to do. And I understand what you're saying, and written into the general statute, you're told you're going to do this. Now, will you please vote on it and agree with it? Like, from the things, the meetings I've had, at least with the western 7 counties, those counties are not happy, and very likely in the end game might come down to saying we don't agree with the board structure. And I don't know who then at that point. I don't know where to go.
And Michael, I know that all the best intentions to get county representation back on the board, but there's no guarantee to that. There's nothing in there that says that's gonna happen again. As county commissioners, we're elected to represent our county to the best of our ability. And we sit on this board to represent our county and those 55,000 people in my county who are not gonna have representation on this board anymore. And as a county commissioner, I have dual responsibilities, one to the county commission, and I want to serve this board as well as it can too. And especially the most important thing is making sure the needs of our mental health people in our state are met. So that's what we need to remember. This is about how we're going to take care of the mental health needs in our state. And to me, to think that cutting out half of the board members, half of the counties, is not really a solution. So, I understand you mean well, and it was a very hard thing to have to decide who was on it. Western Highland gets as many board at large seats as we do. I mean, this is all stuff that has been discussed and is not really sitting well with quite a few county commissioners and quite a few county people. So we have to take this back to our counties and tell them, sorry, we're off. And those that are on the counties that got on that new board ought to remember that they're just a law or separation away from losing their seats too. So those people that got on the reconstituted board, they're just as much at risk as anybody, because it's obviously that the counties are not carrying the weight that I think they should, and other commissioners do too, in this organization. And I think the executive part's doing a great job, but really the board should be leading the executive rather than executive, the company leading the board. The board has responsibility, and the diverse nature brings up a lot of ideas and different understanding of problems that can help solve those problems. So I know we're beating a dead horse, but there's no guarantee that we'll ever be on this board again once that goes through and that vote happens. We come into compliance with statute. As a board, we need to think about that, Sergeant.
To me, when I've worked on the transition board, and I look at it like the state has said, you're going to do this. So the executive committee and transition committee, we're working to do our best to get to meet what the state wants. Now, we can say no, and like Michael said, thumb our nose up at the state and say, if we don't have county representation on there, then we're not going to support this. The state is going to just look at us and say, okay, you'll go where we tell you. So instead of us having other like behavioral crossroads, follow to us and let us be the leader, we're going to be told, you're going to go to these crossroads, and here we're going with 15 counties or 23 counties. And they're going to be telling us what to do. I don't like it that each county is not getting a representation here.
I was picked to be on as one of the counties. And as far as the amount that Ash puts into it, or Watauga puts into it, we're talking about a very, very, very small amount of money compared to the budget for Smoky. And if any county wants to know where their money is going, then like Wilkes, Watauga, Avery, Allegheny, Ash, you need to go to your provider. Billy West needs to know exactly how much money Watauga puts into it, Ash puts into it, and how much Smoky passes on to it. Smoky don't keep the money, it's a pass-through. So when we're saying all this money that we as a county are putting in, it goes straight to our counties. We called Billy West a few months ago when all this started, or maybe back other than that. And I had him explain if the money from Ashe County went to Ashe County. And yes, the money comes from Ashe County to Smoky to Daymar. And then Daymar, most of that money is spent in Ashe County. Now, there are some programs that they do for all the 5 counties. But the majority of money that we put in is spent in Ashe County. So I think we're just hurting ourselves if we're saying that we're not going to support this.
I do hear you, and the money is not my main concern, it's the board representation, it's connecting Smoky to each county and having a direct link through the county commissioner where grievances can come through and that you can report back to the commission from what's going on, not an advisory board, secondhand information. I may as well watch a video on YouTube. So
I agree with you, but Lonnie Bill has worked tirelessly to get this bill changed in state legislature. A couple of months ago, he spoke with Secretary Boss. And to try to get Smoky in under this, get a waiver on this requirement. And we have worked through the County Commissioners Association to try to get this done. But the problem is with the state legislature. And it seems to me we're hurting ourselves if we just thumb our noses.
Well, I think, I don't disagree at all, Judy. We as county commissioners like to think we have a whole lot of power sometimes, but when we get right down to it, we don't have a whole lot. And most of what we do is govern the state statutes. We are literally an arm of the state, an arm, not the head, not even the leg. But we are an arm of the state of North Carolina, each and every one in the county. And ultimately, we're controlled by those state statutes. And we can kick and scream and all the noise we want to, but, you know, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen.
Mr. Chairman,
You know, I agree with you, we're gonna have to, go ahead with this merger and go from there, see if we can do it through legislature, or get them to do the waiver for the 1.2 million population. But I think we're gonna have to go for this merger and move forward.
She's called for question.
that's fine. I don't think we've had 20 minutes for that. That's fine. Go ahead.
All right, let's just do this by raising your hand. All in favor of the motion as stated by Mr. Lavender, second by Ed. All in favor of the motion, raise your right hand. Got it?
Mr. Chairman, you know I can't vote.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. All opposed, raise your right hand. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just point out that I think we're fortunate that we've done that, because one thing I started to say a moment ago is that the alternative is potentially the secretary could have determined our board structure on her own. And I think this is moving forward, at least with these agreements, is preferred to having the secretary do it for us. If you've been following the machinations in that office lately, you know what I'm talking about.
Brian, you want to go ahead and?
Can I ask for a point of order?
Wait, okay.
Just a point of order. There are some of you who have proxies for missing board members. Those of you that had proxies from other missing board members, can you raise your hand? So that's 1, 2, 3. I was thinking there were 6 proxies.
Yeah, I think there's 6.
Those proxies need to be voted on as well. So Judy Poe has Ronnie Bill's proxy.
No.
Excuse me.
Well, yeah, that's right.
And Rick French had Judy Davis. Joyce Edwards had Michael. Greg Cable had Mike Edwards.
Yes.
Billy Kennedy had Fred Albert. And Michael Lavender had Dan McLamory. Correct?
I have had his proxy before. I didn't get one for this meeting in particular. So I don't know if once he's signed over a proxy, that's permanent, and he also said he's not necessarily serving on this board anymore. I don't know if y'all have gotten his resignation yet. And that was just an email I saw recently, so I don't know where he's at on his board membership right now.
From what I read in the Watauga Democrat, it was effective the 1st of 2014.
I think he sent
Sorry.
Jill.
He sent Jill an email and elected you as having his proxy.
Okay. Well, I'll vote the same way I voted my vote there.
Okay,
I guess
so-
this dismantling of a good board.
All right, so that's another no. Are there any other votes that would be voted no?
I had Dana Jones project.
Yeah, you did have that. Yes. Because, yeah, Dana told me earlier that she
So are you clear, we've got those 2 no's?
2 no's so far. Any others that would vote no? Okay, so the motion still carries.
Okay, all right, everything's clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Brian?
That was the merger agreement. And the,
and the closeout.
okay, good. Then we have both pieces of business covered.
You'll all get a copy of that without the draft mark on there and with the management agreement attached, which you already have, but that's Exhibit A, and the closeout agreement is Exhibit B. So y'all will have the full packet.
Let me go back to the top of my agenda items there, regionalization of MCOs, and just a quick recap. The expectation that the number of MCOs be reduced to 3 or 4 has become more and more real. There was a meeting of all the CEOs of the MCOs with Dave Richard, the Division Director of North Carolina Mental Health, Developmental Disability, Substance Abuse Services, met with us and specifically addressed the desire for that number to be reduced and some of the criteria, I guess, that would be used in achieving that and what the rewards might be that would be associated with that. Sometimes in broad brush and sometimes, more explicit. The takeaway that I can share with you is that 4 would be the number that would be agreeable to DHHS. That there be a minimum of 300,000 covered lives, and that's Medicaid lives. So you have to separate that from a general population. So just, for example, we're currently at something like 76 or 78,000 covered lives as our 15 counties. Western's a little bit under that, maybe closer to somewhere between 70 and 75, so that gives you an idea. Between the two, when we're consolidated, we'd be at about 150, or maybe 160, so we'd be about halfway there. That these regions would be comprised of counties that would be contiguous geographically. We don't want any stragglers or folks reaching over other counties to create their regions. And that for this effort, this would be consistent with the Secretary and the Governor's plan for Medicaid reform, and that would be a manner for us to be considered positively in the future, that there would be a fit for the way we do business, and that is the 1915 BC waiver, that there would be a place for that in the new world of Medicaid reform. And you may remember us talking about the governor's plan and the need for DHHS to have a plan this spring for how they were going to go about creating this vision of an integrated care system. So I don't know, could you call this a deal? I guess you could. An agreement that if we were able to accomplish this, it would be viewed very positively in terms of how our fit would be in that system going forward. And you know, one of the, whether it's a criticism or an open question, you know, there was never very much discussion about how you take the huge investment that there's been by the governor and the General Assembly and your dollars and our effort in creating this public management. How do you get from there to where the governor and the secretary would like the system to go? So this provides that bridge. So 4, I guess, is really what seems to be the magic number. For our western region, I think it is safe to say that the belief is that the western region would be comprised of CenterPoint and Partners in the consolidation of Smoky and Western, and that would meet the criteria of the geographic contiguity in the 300,000 covered lives for Medicaid. In that spirit, you know, I've been discussing this with the CEOs of those MCOs, and we agreed to have an executive staff meeting where leadership from our organizations came together, and we did that Friday in Hickory, and just started to talk more definitively around, well, what would it mean to have a western region? And you know, let me tell you the obvious. You know, it doesn't take long for people to, you know, start wondering, well, who's going to be in charge of this? And really, at the end of the day, you're talking about merger. There's no way to accomplish what the state is going to expect without mergers. And in that scenario, you know, are there winners and losers? Who's going to be the winners? Who's going to be in charge? What does it mean about my job? This is the human condition that I think we can all appreciate. In an effort to stay off that agenda, the way I have framed it and asked my colleagues to look at this is in a scenario like this, that we're 3 businesses that do the same thing, and we're right next to one another. And just as being good business people, at some point we would look to those next to us and say, gee, if we work more collaboratively with you, could we do something better? Would it be more efficient? Would it cost less money? Well, of course. I know I would do that. That would be essential to making quality improvements and becoming more efficient. So if you look at it that way, this is maybe just a more accelerated evolution that would be consistent with running a good business. Does there need to be 3 of everything we have 3 of? No, there doesn't. Are there ways that if we thought collectively rather than independently, we would be more efficient. And then ultimately, that would create savings or mean better functioning. Well, yes, without a doubt. So that's the spirit with which we've pursued this. And it didn't take really too long to come up with, I describe them as business areas, again, the things that we all do. And there's probably half a dozen or more where we could look for low-hanging fruit, where it would just be, pretty apparent that there could be some real value in us doing things either in a more standardized way or in a singular way. So there's an agenda that's being developed around those activities with those two MCOs. And that meeting was facilitated by Tara Larson, who was great help to us in our work with Western. And I hope we continue to work with that group towards wherever we need to get to. Now, of course, the question becomes, when do you need to get to what milestone? And that's not clear. I think in terms of how we think about this, though, I would offer to you that it is likely that by June of next year, that if the state stays true to its plan to request a different type of waiver for which we could be part of, okay, our specialty system could be part of, that would need to be submitted probably by June. So if I was the secretary or I was the governor, I would certainly want to see enough clarity around how this regionalization was going to occur to have a comfort zone around that when I was submitting that waiver proposal. So does that mean that everybody's got to be merged by then? No. I mean, that would be impossible. But would there have to be a degree of commitment that might exist through, again, the very things we went through? We had a transition plan that was an agreement in principle that was signed off on by the secretary. And then we had management agreements that really, were much more explicit around authority and responsibility. Having things like that in place at that time, I would think would be the type of evidence that the state would want to see to again, have a comfort zone that this was really going to happen. At the end of this, what they want to have is a contract with 3 or 4 of us, or that if they dealt with large insurance companies, let's say, for the health insurance part of it, that there are going to be 3 or 4 contracts. And in order to do that, you have to get to merger. There really isn't another mechanism structurally that would allow that now. So let me just stop there with that one and see if you have any questions. The next steps for us are to accept an invitation from CenterPoint to have some board-to-board discussion, and we talked about that at the executive committee, and Rick and Chuck Vine would be, I guess, representatives. We need to find a way to include Western representation in this. And then also I've been invited probably sometime in October to make a presentation to the CenterPoint board on what a consolidation might be like. And again, I would base that on our experience with Western, and in fact, really, we've done this 4 times. 3 times, I'm sorry. So those would be the next events that would occur. And again, that's probably in the October timeline. Good on that?
The CenterPoint, the only other one.
CenterPoint and Partners. And again, Partners was Mental Health Partners, Crossroads, and Partners. So that was a collection of those 3 area programs. And they did that before becoming an MCO. And again, that was there have been these different requirements as we've gone along that required everyone to get bigger. That one was, you had to make a population of 500,000 general population, 70,000 Medicaid covered lives. So this has been a very clear policy on behalf of the state for some time. It continues to ramp up. Yes, sir.
Does Center Point meet the population threshold?
They
I mean,
are,
by themselves.
they're about just a little over 70,000 covered lives. So from a Medicaid, from an insurance perspective, they're small.
Right.
Partners is a little bit smaller than what will be as a consolidated entity with Western. That puts it in perspective. So again, I think we calculated that Western and Smoky together will be about 160 maybe covered lives. Partners, maybe 100,000, a little more. We don't get to 300,000 with Partners and Smoky with a consolidated Western. So Center Point would take us over that threshold.
Right. The reason why I asked is I was on a phone call yesterday with an attorney in the school government, and he indicated that the Alliance Healthcare went over the threshold there through interlocal agreement with Cumberland and Johnston County, Alliance being Wade County and Durham County. Even though those counties have their own individual LME MCO setups, but they did that through interlocal agreement. Since then, Cumberland County has since merged with Alliance, and Johnston County is still freestanding.
Yeah.
And in order to get past the governance issue, is there something that we can put in place as they were allowed to do?
Well, they're, the only allowance on governance is if you're over 1.2 million, and we're about, with Western and Smoky combined, we're at about 150,000 short.
And that's why I'm asking with what we're seeing on the horizon with future consolidations, and it just seems to me
Oh, yeah, we'll be way over, oh, sure, yeah.
Absolutely.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. Yeah, we'll be way over with the addition, if that merger occurs, yeah, we'll be way over 1 million too. I mean, just Western and Smoky are almost making it.
That's exactly right, and that's why I was asking, since it's very probable that we're going to see future consolidations.
Right.
And why not seek out these type of local agreements that they were allowed to get exceptions on that, and we make requests and it didn't go very far.
Well, there aren't any counties that would be able to do that at this point. I mean, there are no single counties left to do that. They're all part of.
That's right. That's right. Just looking at, obviously we're consolidating.
Right.
So if we're 150,000 people short, is that what you just said?
Yes.
Should we not ask that that's close enough?
That was asked.
I think
Okay.
it was asked and they said no, but it just seems to me that Alliance Healthcare was allowed to cross that population to count the numbers. Well, through an interlocal agreement, which doesn't seem to be as.
But they're, whether it's an interlocal agreement or a merger, they've coalesced a number of counties that are all under waiver, okay? So in other words, their contract includes all of those counties.
I think what, maybe, we're stepping here, but I think what he's saying is that in the case of Johnston, having Johnston with them, whether through interlocal or whether through merger, put them over the 1.25. We don't have anybody else ready to come with us through agreement or through merger yet to put us over that. So they got there because somebody was ready to sign that.
Be part of them, just not to merge. And to tell you the truth, I don't know what's going to happen with Johnston.
Still two separate entities. Johnston County has their own mental health setup, but they use an interlocal agreement.
Right.
Obviously, go to the partner, but it seems like there was some exceptions made there, not to the request. But I'm just making a point, not as much asking a question.
Yeah. Well, there's no counties that would do, I guess the bottom line is there's no counties that could have any, whether it's merger or interlocal agreement, there are none that would do that now.
Brian, I have a question about Mecklenburg. Are they figuring into this?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up.
Are you suggesting something? I'm not ready to go there.
State of Mecklenburg.
You can just imagine the, all the anxiety and difficulty, with the board and the Constitution and now this regionalization. I mean, it's just a powder keg out there, and every day there's another rumor and more drama. And I guess it was last Friday, there was a blog that emanates from an attorney in Raleigh where it was suggested that Smokey was going to be taking Mecklenburg. And I got a call Monday from the council chair, or I'm sorry, the executive director of the council, and I, somebody sent it to me, I just laughed it off. I didn't even, take it at all serious because it's very far from my thoughts. But, just to give you an idea of the kind of drama and energy there is out there now, I got a call to say, gee, Brian, I heard this rumor that, Smokey's is ready to take Mecklenburg. I said, no, that's not the case. But what has happened is that Mecklenburg has kind of hung out there in this single county status that is no longer allowed in the law. Something's going to happen with Johnston County. They just haven't figured out how to do it yet. I mean, I don't know what they are. They really don't even fit into anything that is in the statute now. But anyway, so Mecklenburg has to change too. So they have to find a partner. And there's been it's been a lot of conflict there. And the history where they originally were assigned because they didn't pass muster with the whole readiness on the waiver, and Mercer more or less deemed them, not able to pass go, and got assigned to Cardinal, and then they were reassigned by the new secretary after she had actually upheld the original previous secretary. It was a mess. So what Mecklenburg has done is had a bunch of committees and a lot of work done and decided that they were going to have a request for information from their neighboring MCOs, which is Cardinal and Partners, to, I guess, judge their interest in merging. So, and I don't know the dates on that, but that's, was announced. They had a commissioner meeting, I think, like a week ago Tuesday, where that was the decision that they made, because they're having to change as well.
And their CEO just resigned.
And their CEO just resigned. So, for my colleagues at Centerpoint and Partners, my recommendation is that Mecklenburg not become a part of our western region. And, here we are, where we have this relationship with these other MCOs that, will have to make decisions on how they're going to conduct themselves. And one of the very important takeaways that Dave Richard gave us, along with this whole description about regionalization, is to be mindful of how any decision that one makes affects the rest of the state now. So is Mecklenburg in the vision for what is a western region? If you were to ask the secretary, well, I'm not the secretary, so I can't answer that. But the most consistent conversations I've been part of have to do with a western region that is does not include Mecklenburg. So if Mecklenburg decides to do something different, the secretary eventually has to approve it. So there you go. A lot of drama. So I'm gonna have to hurry up here. Partnership for the Future, status of transition activity. It is going so well, it's really hard to believe. So many people deserve so much credit, from the boards to the staff, Christina. I don't know how to describe to you what a big effort this is. When you just step back and think of taking two organizations that have very, very complex businesses that they operate and blend them together in some way that's going to work. It's kind of like changing the wing on an airplane while you're flying it. But we've done it, and we're, coming down to the wire. And, I'm very, very consistent in not over-promising. Are there going to be problems where contracts aren't quite right? Because, every provider that had a contract with Western has got to have a contract with Smoky now. We have to flip the information system. There's countless details and major activities that have been underway for a long time. All of those are not going to be perfect. Providers are going to get paid. Consumers are going to be taken care of. Whatever problems we have will be corrected. And, we've just worked to absolutely minimize those, and people are working 7 days a week. And despite that, there's always going to be bumps, just like when we went live originally. Nothing that's going to take us off the road, though. And it'll ease up. We're good at this. At the risk of sounding cocky or anything, and I'm not. We've worked hard to be good at this, and we make it happen as good as we can. Take the effort. We have not missed a deadline. We have not missed a deadline. We said we'd go live on the waiver when we did. We said we'd, create this merger agreement on time, and we've done the work along the way we've needed to get to where we will be October 1st, which is to have a consolidated entity. So.
Brian, I just add that I second what you're saying about staff and their competence, but also add we have some very agreeable partners in Western Highlands. The
Absolutely.
County managers who are leading that organization right now are just very, I can't think of another word to use, but agreeable and accommodating and very much interested in being a partner, not worried about egos and losing and all that kind of stuff. Very, very nice people to work with.
Great people to work with.
Just so many ways to go wrong in something like this. Just so many opportunities for problems to crop up, and we just have not had a lot. We just have not had a lot. So, community forums. We have been true to our culture and I think our value system, which is to be very engaged with communities that we serve. And Christina and I, and in some cases Mel and Bruce, have been around to all of the Western Highlands counties, in some cases multiple times, to really just do community meetings where we talk about what's happened, why it's happened, what's going to happen, how does Smokey think about different things, and again, it's not the last time we'll do this, but those are very important events for us to get under our belts. Not only for us to talk about the things that are important for us to say about what this new consolidated entity is going to be, but to also get feedback from the community, because that's what we're about. We care about that. And boy, that was exhausting, I'll tell you that. I know, Christina, you ought to get some commentary here. You were in more of them even than I was.
I think we had a really great experience. We got to meet a lot of people. You know, some places we had quite a few people show up. Some places we had a very small crowd. We got a lot of good feedback. I think we had a variety. Even the smallest group, we've been to Brevard twice. I was there last night. You know, you always seem to have a provider or providers in the room. You had some consumers and families. You had some different stakeholders. Some of our staff went in care coordination, community collaboration, and people were there to talk about our local presence and Smoky's model and Smoky's commitment to be in the counties and to be there and to have a face in each and every one of the 23 counties. And I think people were very, very much surprised at our model and who we are and how that we are really going to deliver on that for them. There's a lot of people kind of waiting to see what we're really going to do, but I have no doubt that we will do that in the departments that are very involved on a local level. So there's a lot of work to be done. A lot of, like Brian said, with the new kid on the block, we met a lot of new people, made a lot of new friends, but I think it's really helped us to get out, and I think people have been very appreciative of getting out. So
I would say the two, sort of boil it down to two kind of big things that represent differences, and that's, you know, more of what kind of sticks out in these situations is our model care coordination. And, you know, it's a much more intensive presence in the western counties than they were accustomed to, and that's a great thing. You know, folks really are looking forward to that. And the other has to do with our concept of a comprehensive provider and how we try to knit certain services together in a way that creates more efficiency and really better service delivery for clients. And, you know, one fairly sizable change we're making as of October 1st comes a different mobile crisis provider for the western counties. So because that's a change, a lot of conversation about that and how that's going to work out. And of course, we invited excuse me, RHA to be part of these meetings since they're the new provider of that service. Vantage Point. Boy, this is one I stole from, you know, previous to coming to North Carolina, I was the CEO of a provider agency. And, you know, those board meetings were probably not quite like this, but inevitably you focus a lot of time on the business part of service delivery. And you know, often we'd be reminded that, you know, it's about serving people. And certainly, Jerry, you've done, where'd you go, Jerry? You've done a good job of reminding us of that, and I appreciate that. And I hope you sense in the way we approach things that that's really in our heart. So to make good on that, we used to have, again, it was Fairview Recovery Services. Every board meeting, we do this presentation called Vantage Point. And that was really from more of a grassroots, from the perspective of a client or you know, a program and how someone would experience that. To just kind of slow us down a minute and really get us engaged at that level. So, you know, we'll bring that back. I'll bring that south here to Smoky, and this evening we're going to have Jenny talk about an area that, you know, we could spend a lot of time on, and that has to do with our commitment to making certain improvements for clients that end up at emergency departments, you know, having a psychiatric or substance abuse crisis. And we've just, you know, made a really big commitment to a host of improvements there. So this will be our first inaugural Vantage Point conversation, Jenny.
Thank you, Brian. It is nice, I think, when you've been sitting for so long, very necessarily talking about issues of administration and law and of regulation, to take just a moment to focus very intently on why you're really in this room, and that is to try to ensure that we take the very best possible care of people with mental health, substance abuse, intellectual developmental disabilities, concerns. And Brian asked us tonight to talk about the Crisis ED initiative, and it's really nice to talk about this initiative because it focuses on the people with the very greatest needs, the people who have the most significant mental health or substance abuse issues, and who are at the greatest risk for adverse outcomes. Brian mentioned that these would be the people who would end up in our emergency departments, would be in behavioral crisis, would be testing the limits of our system in every possible way. All of you in your counties know about the struggles that your hospitals are having, your emergency rooms are having, your law enforcement officers are having. So as Brian mentioned, really more than a year ago, we made this huge commitment to try to take on this issue in a very comprehensive way. You've seen information on this before. Tonight I brought you in just a packet. This is what it looks like. There are a number of documents in this packet. Every month you see graphs and data, and I'm happy to talk about that, but tonight I'd rather talk about what we're really doing and what we really think the impact is. So in the packet, you have your regular graph. You also have a one-page flyer that you've seen before that just explains the Crisis ED initiative to you. The thing I'd really like for you to look at right now is the document that is under the flyer. It has the Western Highlands and the Smoky Mountain logo on it, and it says Accomplishments 2013. And as I reached out to all my partners in this effort, particularly Care Coordination, QM, and others, and said, help me vet this. Let's get this on one page. Let's talk about what we've done during the past year. My goodness, there's a lot on this page. I will not read it all to you, but I'll try to select a couple items that I think really reflect the work. And all of this on this page, these accomplishments include community and professional education. They reflect creation of tools to go in a toolkit to work on this issue. And they reflect piloting new procedures and practices. That's all on this page. After each item, I try to indicate, and I may have missed some, but I try to indicate each county where these things are ongoing. And I can tell you that on this page, all 15 of the Smoky counties are identified behind at least one of these accomplishments, some counties behind several accomplishments. So there's a lot of training that shows up on this page. I'd like to focus first on the implementation of an ED risk assessment tool, which is a very hard thing to pull off when you get law enforcement, hospital folks in a room, and you get providers in a room, and you try to figure out a good way to decide how long does law enforcement have to stay in the hospital, in the ED, with somebody who is involuntarily committed. So we piloted this. Avery County really led this effort. We're using this tool in Caldwell and Watauga. It's a tool where several people stand together, they assess how that person is doing the ED, and they make a decision that it's okay for law enforcement to leave with the agreement that they will come back immediately if needed. So what has happened with this? In these counties, we have reduced law enforcement time in the ED, and we have reduced the cost of the county for that law enforcement. And we've had very good outcomes for consumers. And law enforcement, yes, has been called back sometimes. They call 911, they come right back and they secure that situation. So that's a really good development. The next bullet after that, which will be the fourth bullet, I want to focus for a minute about development of integrated community education and marketing plans. We have Watauga, McDowell, Wilkes County, and Polk County working very hard right now to develop a comprehensive community education plan where we'll use all the tools we can create. We'll use PSAs, we'll use Speakers Bureau, we'll go out and talk to physician practices. We'll try to talk about what we want to accomplish. We want to divert away from the EDs. We want to use IBCs only when we have to. We want to intervene early to prevent crisis. We want to use our local crisis away from our EDs. There's a lot of education needed to change these cultures. So these counties are working on what I call integrated community education plans. When I say that, I mean that health coalitions are involved, public health's involved, DSS is involved, law enforcement, and our providers are involved in creating a plan that we all work together. I'd like to skip down to the one that says consistent trending data presented at all local CEDI meetings. In all of the counties, there are 3 that are lagging a little behind, but we have really consistent monthly meetings where all the partners are in the room to talk about how we're managing these issues in the EDs, how we're working these problems. The one piece that was missing was hard data, evidence of our work, so that we could judge our progress. Without that empirical evidence, sometimes the conversations get a little emotional. Sometimes we point fingers, sometimes we place blame. Bringing data in equalizes all of that and helps us understand whether we're making progress or not. Now, the interesting thing, I really want to point this out, Haywood County data reflects for the months of April through August 2013, a 100% increase in consumers seen in the community versus the emergency department. 100% increase. Those are all people that never had to come into the ED, never got an involuntary commitment procedure, but were stabilized, were kept safe, and were tracked into treatment. That is, everything I've talked about before is what we call an output, something we created or something we did. This is called an outcome. Outcomes are hard to come by. This is data that shows what we're doing is working. And in Ashe County, we have data that shows that same trend. We want to see that data in every county. Another thing that we did was to implement high-cost, high-risk interagency staffing with the goal of prevention, early intervention, and crisis planning. Rhonda Cox's care coordination team is very involved in this. I don't think I even have all the counties listed, but the closest I could do was to say this is happening in Dowell, Caldwell, Jackson, Macon, Cherokee, Clay, Swain, and Watauga. Rhonda, have I missed anybody?
Seems like there's one that will go with that.
But for a year to have decided this is what we wanted to do and to get that implemented and to have that happen consistently, where these people are coming together to make decisions that impact on people's lives, to keep them out of crisis, to keep them out of the ED, to keep them from having an involuntary commitment to inpatient treatment. That is a huge accomplishment. In the packet, you also have a couple of our products that I want you to see. We created a regional crisis brochure, and you just have a sample of one region. Looks like this, trifold brochure. It is to be used everywhere we can use it to educate everybody we can about what is a behavioral health crisis, how can we prevent the crisis, what are our resources that we can use, what can a consumer do for himself, or what can a family member or friend do to avert crisis to help someone get the help that they need. The regional brochures indicate inside where the regional walk-in centers are and how to be in touch with mobile crisis. They also have this panel that is almost the beginning of a crisis plan for an individual. We can help a person reporting things that are important to them to stay safe and to stay engaged with treatment. So this was kind of one of our early products. The other one that we're really excited about is the booklet that is the last thing in your packet. And this is a resource guide for consumers about the involuntary commitment process. This came from our experience, and this is the product of our working with our CPAC to develop this tool. A family member in Macon County said, you know, my son was I needed help desperately. The only things I knew to do, and this is the culture we live in, was to go to the magistrate's office, to get an involuntary commitment, and to go to the ED. And they went through that process for this son. And it was a bad experience. It was more than was needed to resolve his problems. And once you start that process, it's very hard to turn it around. So this parent said, create something for us at a level that consumers and families can use that teach us about involuntary commitment and our options, how to avoid that, how not to use that process if we don't have to. So the first half of the booklet is, again, all about prevention and what you can do instead of going to the magistrate's office. But then there's a whole flow from Mark Botts, with his permission, that talks about what happens when you do start that process. Now, we have shown this to hospital staff in 2 large meetings. We've shown this to providers. Last week, in a half-day training for law enforcement in Haywood County, we showed it to 60 law enforcement officers and 3 magistrates. Everybody's very, very excited about this product. I really feel there's great potential. Hospitals are saying, how quickly can we have it? We want to use it as a part of our discharge process for patients in inpatient care. We want to use it in EDs to educate families, friends, loved ones, and consumers. So we're really excited about the potential this has to help people find help in crisis and to avoid perhaps a stronger intervention than is really needed. So those are just some of the things that we've done with the Crisis ED initiative. I think it's kind of good to sit in this room and say, after everything that's gone on, all the hard work, all the high-level discussions, I think this is kind of hard evidence for you that we're still doing the work every day. We're still doing all those things that you expect us to do and want us to do in our MCO. Are there any questions?
Well, we'll keep doing something every month along those lines and we'll focus again, instead of 30,000 feet, more about 6 feet. Let's see. E-legislation, Allison.
I just wanted to mention that there is a summary of the transition to community living legislation in your packet, just to let you know. Some of you may not realize that this actually ended up being included in Senate Bill 553 at the last minute, added at the end, and this came out of a Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations that, I guess the recommendations came out at the beginning of the summer, and this was the result. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Okay. That's it for me.
We have, next item is the consent agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at those items? And if so, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Larry Clark, motion to approve. Billy Kennedy, second.
Thank you. Any questions? All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous? Let me mention a couple things before we adjourn. One is, don't forget to fill out you have a travel form, you fill out. You also have a token if you're in the parking deck. I believe, is that right? Everybody have one of these. If you don't, see you will. Is there any other business?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Bill.
Just wanted to talk about setting up this meeting. Got any ideas? I guess we wait till Western Highlands, where's the merger, and then after that. And
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to open this up for discussion. I just wanted to point out, because we passed these out at the beginning of the meeting, this is one of the documents that we mentioned would be brought to you tonight. It's the recommended rotation schedule, but there are a couple of changes on here that I need to point out, just so that you don't carry them back and misinformation get out. This morning, we received a new document from CPAC, and the name of Dan Lane as chair has been changed, and it is now Judy Johansson. I may be mispronouncing that, I apologize if I am. In addition to that, they recommended flipping the term on the chair and the consumer. So in their recommendation, Pat is recommended for a 3-year term, and the chair is recommended for 1. Finally, over on the back, Chuck Vines informed me this afternoon that the Henderson County manager has indicated that he's not going to have the time commitment to devote to the board right now, and they wanted to substitute the Polk County manager for that position, and that is Marsh Pittman. I think it's spelled a little differently, maybe something like M-A-R-C-H-E or something like that. Pittman out of Polk County. Just make sure that's the only, I believe that's the only other change on there. But I just wanted to point that out since people were carrying that back. Right.
All right, thank you. Is there, yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask a question about the community forums. Do we have a schedule for Central and or the other counties yet?
No, but we will. We're pretty full right now. And Shelley sends your regards to everyone.
Is there a motion for adjournment? Got it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.